Fujifilm Xt3.
John, it's the Xt2.
Oh jeez, hold on. You ready? Fujifilm Xt3.
Still Xt2.
Oh, okay, hold on. These things look the same. All right, you ready? Fujifilm Xt3. Fuji Xt3. So excited to be able to test this new camera. Got it for a very short time. Fujifilm quickly gave it to me. I'm going to shoot down to Nordic Beach as well as a nearby field where I'm going to do a 2-location setup. I'm going to use one flash off camera. I've been so fortunate to have found someone who's helped us as a model because it wasn't a shoot day for me. So yeah, I'm very excited to get my hands on this camera, put it through its paces and report back to you as soon as the shoot's done. Just testing the new backside illuminated sensor. Noise seems well handled. Autofocus seems great. And I just want to make a note that images that I'm taking here are JPEG out of camera. Unfortunately, RAWs aren't being able to be read yet by Lightroom. So what you see is Pro Neg High. Clipping of highlights. So I've reduced highlights in camera. I've increased contrast and shadows in camera. And I've also increased saturation and a bit of sharpness. Occasional little adjustment in crop and post, but it's a good representation of what the camera is producing in camera. Having received the camera only last night and only having sort of today to use the camera, only in one day having to return it tomorrow, I didn't actually have a shoot today, and I'm just really grateful that Marisa was able to help us today. She's a friend of Mark, who's our videographer, and it was a last minute call and she came to our rescue. But I also try to do the shoots in line with her business, which is Pilates. And yeah, do you want to just say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, my name is Marisa and I'm a Pilates instructor based in Cape Town, and I've been teaching for about a year, and fitness is something I'm very passionate about.
Cool, and I'm going to leave some links at the bottom of the video for a business. So any of you guys living in Cape Town and you're looking for a Pilates instructor, she's the one to go for. Thanks, Marisa.
It's a pleasure.
Cool. So what we have here is the Xt3. Now, it looks almost identical to the Xt2. I took it out in a shoot. I only got back late yesterday evening. I quickly looked at the JPEGs this morning on my iPad, and yeah, very impressed. It's hard to be honest, in this review, it's hard for me to tell you exactly what the extent of improvement is when it comes to image quality. It's got a backside illuminated sensor, supposedly better noise performance, at higher ISOs. And generally, it's because of the sensor improvement. Obviously, it's brought new features to the camera which we didn't have before. How to quantify that is very difficult. I mean, I was very impressed with the image quality that I did get. as I was with the Xt2. So I think it's going to take a little bit of time for me to determine what sort of improvements there are. Obviously, you get 2 million more pixels, goes from 24 to 26 million pixels. So obviously, you do have a higher quality image in the sense that just a high number of pixels. How that affects the noise performance in relation to the new sensor, meaning cramming more pixels on the sensor, all these different things I haven't yet quantified. So unfortunately, I can't help you with that. But what I can help you with is general performance of the camera, how it feels in hand, improvements that are made, and I think a lot of them are notable. I think that, yeah, although it looks identical, and I think the fact that the camera looks very close to the Xt2 means to me that they've come of age, Fuji, meaning they've found a body, a chassis, a construction that they're very happy with. Obviously, they've gone through their teething problems in the beginning, and they've now left with a body shape that's obviously meeting more clients' requirements, and obviously is giving them better results from a repair and issues that might arise with the camera physically. So that's important to note. A lovely construction as per the Xt2 and the other camera models. Beautifully laid out dials. Overall, just a joy to use, just as the Xt2 was. So as I was shooting yesterday with the Xt3, at times I actually forgot that I was using an Xt3. I was using my Xt2. But there were noticeable things. There was the improvement in autofocus. At one stage, I got Marisa to run towards me. I shot it at about 12,800 ISO, and I got it to run towards me late in the evening, and it tracked fine. It seemed to be a definite step up from the Xt2. So those are looking for autofocus improvements, 100%. If you're looking for less blackout between shots, or when you put the shutter in, definite improvement. We can actually thank, I think, the Sony A9 for giving a bit of pressure to Fuji to improve that, which is good for us as the consumer. There are definite things that have improved physically on the body. One of them actually is unusual in the sense that it's bothered me, but I've never voiced my opinion about it. And it's because, I suppose, not wearing glasses myself, you don't think of yourself as needing the diopter, but you do. You still got to actually focus that screen to suit whatever your eyesight needs, your eyes need. So what would happen when I was shooting the Xt2s, if using the Spider Pro belts, there would be movement from time to time on the actual diopter, and you would lose, and you would actually focus and think, are you in focus or aren't you in focus? But meanwhile, you're out of focus on the diopter. Very cool about it is that now you actually extend it out. You pull it out, it clicks out, and then every movement of it is an actual click. So there's a very audible click. You can feel it as you move, so you can count them back if you're trying to find the exact focus, and then to lock it off, you push it down back in. Far improved system than what it was before, so that's a massive improvement. You'll notice on the top dials that they've actually decreased the height of the dials, and I think I wouldn't say increased the size of the drive dial or anything like that, but they've made them almost the same in height. They've kept obviously the shape of the dials exactly the same, and I think overall it feels good. It feels like you get a better grip on the dial. I think it may also have something to do with the fact that as these cameras get older, like my Xt2s, I was finding that when I was turning the dial, it would actually turn the bottom one as well over time, and then I'd have to sort of move it to loosen it up. Maybe that's also there to improve that. I can't tell for sure, but there has been a change in shape of the dial underneath and the dial on top, the drive dial and for example, the ISO dial.
Also note that the base raw ISO of 200 has dropped to 160. Which is an improvement, especially for those looking to use flash, keeping to sync speed without TTL, or those looking to shoot wide open in full sunlight.
My personal perspective, I don't like these. I don't like the metering dial and the drive dial and so on below this. Those could be brought onto the body in a different way. I hardly ever touch that from my perspective, and I'd rather not even have it there that I can accidentally bump. I'd rather have a quick function button on the body where I can quickly flick between those. I just want dials on the top Fuji. That's just my view. I think that's just a waste from my perspective. How often do people change their metering modes? Very seldom. It's so seldom I'd say that just a function button would do. Changing between single shot and a continuous, maybe for some shooters that's often. I don't know. I think you're either in that mode or you're not in that mode. I don't see people one shot single, one shot high, one shot single, one shot high. I don't think it works that way. But I may be wrong, and I'm happy for people to comment on that. Yeah, take those off. Put a function button on instead of that. To me, that's a waste. But still, that amazing the amazing sort of manual nature of this camera is still there as it is in all the other Fuji bodies. And I think this is what makes Fuji stand up above the rest, in my opinion. It's just, how can I explain? Like, I mean, when I see the Sony camera and I see different cameras around at the moment, amazing specs, amazing everything. They just lack a little bit of soul. I don't know if that's what it is. And I just thoroughly enjoy using this camera. So not only am I getting the quality that can, perform with the other bodies that are out there, I'm getting a camera that I actually enjoy to use. So Fuji, keep that going, please. One thing I know about these cameras, which I was shocked to learn, I was talking to a guy at Fujifilm, I think it was at the release of the Xt2, because I was given a pre-production model of the Xt2 and I used it for a couple of months before release. And very interesting there, I won't say who it was I was speaking to, but they were telling me that when Fujifilm got to the release of the Xt2, they'd only started going into the green with all their X-line cameras. Meaning that all those bodies that were sold before the Xt2, Fuji with its R&D was still in the red. They were still losing money. And that kind of gives you an idea of what it takes to actually make a camera like this cost-wise. So it's also good for us as Fuji customers. I mean, I'm an ambassador for Fuji. I'm a Fuji X photographer, so I must obviously state that I have a leaning towards them or a bias of some kind. But I think overall as a Fuji customer, it's so good to know that Fuji is that far ahead in the game, meaning they're already in the green. Everything they do now generally is in profit. And I think that bodes well for moving forward with the camera with innovation and things like that. And what you'll notice, I think this plays a lot into sort of the shortcomings of the Canon and the Nikon that have just been released. You'll hear the complaints about things. I don't think people actually realize what it takes to actually, off the bat, create a camera like that. I think it's a lot harder than we could ever imagine. And the features that Nikon and Canon have released is in line with what they are actually able to do. And it, besides actually getting into the head of Fuji and finding out the actual information behind the scenes, it'd be very difficult for them to compete as in catch up. There will come a stage where I think they will, obviously. I think a company like Canon has the financial backing, because photography is such a small part of its business, to be able to catch up pretty quickly, I imagine. Nikon, on the other hand, is a struggling company as far as I know. Whether they'll be able to improve in the necessary areas that we would need them to improve, I don't know. It's believed that Fujifilm was asked to buy out Nikon, or at least take over Nikon, or some sort of movement like that. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But signs are that Nikon as a company is battling. So I'm really happy that Fuji is in a positive position, in a profitable position. They are not just making cameras, they make lenses for other manufacturers. They make medical equipment. They're a massive company. I think this all bodes well for the photography department in Fujifilm, is that they have the necessary ammo behind them to create great cameras, and which they have. The other thing about these cameras, I mean, I've spoken about this before. People are obviously asking for for full frame 35mm mirrorless cameras, and that seems to be sort of the, like with Sony's release and Canon and Nikon's release. I still, my argument on that issue is that you're trying to reduce the size of it. Now, you got to understand, when you buy a mirrorless camera with a full frame sensor, yes, it has the perks of a full frame sensor, but you understand that the lenses that you buy for that camera are full frame lenses. The size of the lens is a requirement to be able to put light onto that sensor, or at least to cover that sensor. So yeah, you're scoring on body size, but you're not scoring on lens sizes. And I think the beauty of this system is that they've got the APS-C quality up to a height that's comparable. I mean, if I do a shoot alongside someone with a full frame camera, I can promise you now, at the end of the shoot, there's going to be very little in between us. No one's really going to know what we shot it on. One thing I do know is that my lenses were small. His or her lenses were really large. And I think this is a factor that you've got to consider when you're looking at mirrors. Are you getting into mirrorless for the compact nature of it? If you are, seriously consider APS-C, because you're getting amazing quality, but your lens, your whole setup system fits really well compact into a small bag when you're traveling, and you get good value for money. I mean, this camera I think is going to retail at $1,500 for the quality that it gives. I don't know. I don't think there's any other camera out there that can even come close to this. So again, Fuji's offering a great camera, great value for money, and has kept true to the APS-C sensor and improved it, and what's great about it is if you want a larger sensor, they offer the medium format sensor. They've got two clear, defined sensor ranges. They don't have a whole running line of them. Medium format, APS-C, that's what they've stuck to their guns, and they perfected them, and I think that's great. And also very exciting is at Photokina, I'm hoping they release the new GFX-R, which is a range 50R, I think it is. It's just a rangefinder version of the medium format, which is going to be probably the cheapest or the most affordable medium format digital camera ever made. So I'm very excited about that as well. Okay, when it comes to number of focus points on this camera, it's increased. It's gone from 300 odd up to 425. It's also given us phase detector right across the whole frame, so now you'll be able to do what you would only do in the center of the frame from a focusing point of view, particularly tracking, continuous focus, you're now able to do on the fringes of the frame, which is always a bonus. You don't have to now focus recompose if you want to do something unusual. And then also in other sporting situations, you've often got your subject moving beyond that area where your phase detect would be found, and then you lose a shot. So welcome addition, definitely. What I find when it comes to a couple of the settings, and I haven't looked at it because I didn't have enough time, when I set, for example, the size of my focus area, the square that you use to actually pull focus, and then I went, say, from landscape orientation up into vertical portrait orientation, it went back to the size of that focus area that I had set before. So whatever orientation you pull the camera in, you can either turn it off or on, that it remembers what it was before, or continues it on what it was in the last into the new. I hope that makes sense. So you'll find a lot of the settings that you've used focus-wise are set one way in one orientation, and you can set it a different way in a different orientation. And I think that's important. I never actually thought about that. I've always just presumed, it's going to stay the same until I change it. But it's funny because I was doing a shot where I was doing a landscape shot, then I flipped it up for a portrait shot, and the size of the area that I had selected in the landscape shot now changed to the original block that I had on it before. So that's something just to I need to play with it a bit more to understand it, but there definitely seems to be changes to not every single mode that you shoot in will remember that setting across the board. I can set them individually for different types of shooting, different orientations of shooting, and things like that. So I find that very interesting. I'm not going to get into the movie part at the moment, the movie modes, but there are definite improvements, one being 4K 60, but there's a whole range of things. So I'm a photographer. I do know a little bit about video. I actually studied film production, so but this is not really what I'm going to be talking about. Mine's mainly on photography. One big improvement is on the drive settings. You've obviously got your, same as on the Xt2, you've got your continuous high, continuous low. Continuous low can be set manually in the menu from 3 frames per second up to 5.7 frames per second. Continuous high is 11 frames per second in mechanical shutter mode. And then you can increase that up to 10, 20, 30 frames per second in electronic shutter mode, which is crazy. 11, jump from 11 to 30. You think of a 30 frames per second, you put that, you stitch that together, you've got a video. It's incredible, actually. Obviously, there are concerns with rolling shutter, but because of the new sensor, they've reduced that. So again, I tried to sort of imitate situations where that would occur. I didn't really get anything that presented itself as a concern. I can't say whether rolling shutter is no longer a concern. I'm sure it is, but a definite improvement. So not only, I would imagine people thinking, well, 30 frames per second, that's great. You can only really do static framing with subject moving towards you or away. You can't really track something because that's when you're going to get rolling shutter. I think you can actually track to a degree. Whether you can track at really high speeds, I can't tell you yet. I need to sort of look into that a little bit further. But all signs are that it's positive. And even if you were to reduce it back down to a mechanical shutter to do a tracking of a vehicle, whatever it might be, 11 frames per second is incredible as it is. So these are only added bonuses that we could use. In the drive settings, when you're choosing frames per second, anywhere from 10 to 30 frames per second on the electronic mode, what you'll find is that the image gets cropped by a 1.25 times factor. So it might be a benefit to those who are shooting sports. You want a bit more reach, but that's what's going to happen. It brings in the image, it crops it in, and it reduces, as far as I know, the image down to a 16 megapixel image from the 26. What I do know in the menu, there is a 20 frames per second that doesn't have that reduction on electronic shutter. So I do believe that at one of the settings at 20 frames per second, you can keep your full frame, and you can keep it at 26 megapixels, and an electronic shutter will give you 20 frames per second. I need to confirm that. I haven't really gone through every single one of those things, But from what I can read on the menu, it has a 10 frames per second, a 20 frames per second, a 30 frames per second, all at a 1.25 crop in electronic shutter. And as far as I know, every single one of those is a 16 megapixel image. Then below that in the menu is a 20 frames per second image, frame rate, electronic shutter, but it has no crop, and I believe does not have the reduction in megapixels. So that's very interesting why they give you that one option. But it is there. So it's nice to know that you can shoot up to 20 frames per second without that crop, without that reduction in quality as well. Another feature they added is called pre-shots. Pre-shot is the way I've played with it in the body. It's pretty cool. I see sports shooters and things using this feature. It's in electronic shutter mode. It's on continuous high, and what it does is when you would depress your shutter just to find focus, once you find focus, you'd obviously press further, and that would then release the shutter. What's happening is as soon as the camera recognizes focus, it fires the shot. So it's pre-shotting before you've even pushed the shutter mode. So your requirement is only to find focus. Your requirement isn't to do double movement, which is really cool. I think, if you think about situations where, I would say particularly with subjects moving towards you at quite a high speed, and you're in continuous mode, focus mode, I think the fact that as soon as the camera recognizes a green box, an accurate focus, boy, you've got your shot. There's no delay in that situation. And I think it's definitely worth noting. Another thing to note on the shutter type, obviously we've had mechanical shutter, we've had electronic shutter, we've had a combination of the two, which is I use all the time. Once the camera gets to 8,000th of a second in mechanical, it kicks over to 32,000 up in electronic mode, which I was doing on the Xt3. A fantastic shutter, especially for those like myself who do portraiture, where you want to shoot wide open in full sunlight. This feature gives me most incredible results, where before, if I was in full bright sunlight, I would have to use an ND filter. If I didn't have an ND filter, I'd have to then stop down to f5.6 or f8 to be able to deal, even with the lowest base ISO, deal with bright light of the day. One thing you'll find in the shutter menus that they've now implemented some of the features found on the GFX into the Xt3. So now we've been given the E-front shutter, and you can combine that with the mechanical shutter. E-front is a partly electronic shutter and a partly mechanical shutter. So what it's doing effectively is it's engaging one of the shutter mechanisms, taking it up and keeping the other one there. So when you fire the shutter, it's not the full shutter action that you would get. It's half of it and half electronic. So I personally like that because I'm able to use that on the GFX, for example, using it with flash for shots below 2,000th of a second. Once you go beyond 2,000th of a second, the mechanical shutter kicks in, but it's a welcome addition from my view. What you'll also find on the Xt3 is a change to the way it handles dynamic range. You've obviously got your dynamic auto, your dynamic 100%, 200%, 400%, like you get on the Xt2. They've now allowed you to prioritize that, meaning you can determine the strength of what it determines as the dynamic range. Because obviously you're leaving that up to the camera to be able to evaluate the scene and make discern what dynamic range is needed in that shot and applying it accordingly. Now you can make it lean towards the stronger end, the weaker end, or minimal end, which is also a welcome thing. Obviously, once you engage the dynamic range priority, it then turns off the manual adjustments you can make to highlights and shadows and things like that. It just disengages that because now you've let the camera make those decisions for you. What you'll find on the Xt3 is many of the features of the XH1 have been included in the Xt3. There are many features on the Xt3 that are not included on the XH1, and I think that's got a lot to do with the fact that now we have a new sensor in this camera. But to prevent people from not going for the XH1, they've kept things in the XH1 that are very important to other people. Whether there'll be a firmware upgrade to a certain degree on the XH1 to be able to bring up things like 4K 60 and things like that, I'm not 100% sure. It'd be nice to see, just to keep, Fuji keeps loyal to those who are using the XH1, but you won't find image body stabilization in this camera. You'll only find that in the XH1. And I think, I know a lot of people say they want to use this for video, they wish they had that. I think it's a clever move from Fuji. It's creating a definite path for these two cameras. They're not the same. I mean, this is a photography camera with the ability to do amazing video. I believe a lot of the XH1 is video related, but then you kind of wonder why they've added some of the video features there. And I think it has a lot to do with just the technology and the sensor that's allowing them to do that. Obviously, there's tons of features on this camera I could talk about. those are the, I think, some of the most important features that are of interest to people. And what's interesting is that now the function menu, which obviously you can pre-program your function buttons, has extended because a lot of these features that have been added have been included on the function button list as well, like your pre-shot and things like that. Now you can access them quickly on the functions. I'd be interested to know the thinking behind this battery grip. From what I can see, it's pretty much identical to the Xt2, bar two differences. One of them is the shape of the grip cover, where it goes over the actual camera grip. This gives it an extended grip where it's closer to the XH1 kind of, in the way it extends, protrudes out, where the Xt2 one is a more rounded one that kind of hugs the grip. The Xt2 grip itself and the Xt3 grip itself are identical. So this, the adding of this to the new battery grip has nothing to do with the camera grip. It's just they want to give you a more protruded version. But inside on the actual grip itself, there are two silver pins. Those pins line up with the body. All right. And what those pins allow you to do is to obviously fit it in before you start to screw the grip into the body. What they've done is that, from what I can see, the only difference that makes one grip not work on the other is those two pins. So I may be wrong here, but there is no functional reason, there's no power reason, there's no communication reason why the new grip would be different from the old grip, besides the fact that change the two pins, making you buy this grip for this camera. So, you know, I think Fuji, I understand you need to make money. I understand you're in a business. With things like this, photographers notice these things, and this is just feedback I'd like to give you, is that if you create a grip like this, keep the pins the same, but give photographers the choice between the grip that they want, because they're not the same in handling. The Xt2 grip is actually a fantastic grip. I like the way it hugs around the side of it. I like this as well. I'm still getting used to it. But rather create two grips that both work on both bodies. I think you still retain a lot of your sales, but you won't leave people thinking, okay, you did that on purpose to make money. Now, I might be I'm happy to stand to be corrected on this. There may be an actual functional reason why it's a new grip, but from my perspective, it's just those two pins that are the defining difference, and obviously they line up with the camera body itself. So there's two holes that are put on the base plate of this camera, and they line up with two pins that are in there. So they've obviously deliberately changed that base plate, and they've changed the pin position, and that's the only difference between these two, and then obviously the shape of this. But the shape of it has nothing to do with whether it fits on the Xt2 or the Xt3. If I had to file down these pins, this grip fits on the Xt2. So it's an interesting decision. I'd like to know. I'll have a chat with Fuji about it. They might have a very good reason. Maybe there was an issue with the previous base plate that they needed to remanufacture a new base plate. But yeah, I'll have a chat about them, and maybe I'll give you some feedback on that sometime. Uses the same batteries as the Xt2. Yeah, come Fuji, put a little bit of money into. I don't care if it's exactly the same looking battery, but just improve on that battery's technology and performance. You've got to do that. Yeah, not only are we getting relatively short battery life compared to other systems that are out there. I mean, if you come from a DSLR, you're going to be horrified. I've got used to it. I have 12 batteries, meaning if I have to go from one shoot one day to the next day, I've got protection. Meaning I don't have to charge that night before I go. I can actually get some rest and do another shoot. That's just for me being over the top. But you'll use 5, 6 at a wedding. You'll use 5, 6, 7, 8 at a wedding, depending if you shoot a Jewish wedding. Greek wedding, you're going to be using 8, 9 batteries if you're doing a 14, 15 hour day, easily. So yeah, I think this is an important factor I'd like Fuji to address. Keep the battery the same size, we don't mind, just improve on the technology and the quality of that battery. Because outside of it not lasting, the batteries themselves I don't think are the most robust. I think over time they're going to die quicker than other manufacturers' batteries and things like that. And I know that this battery itself is used on multiple products around the world. It's not just used on this camera. So it's almost like you've chosen a generic type battery that's multifunctional to become your battery. I think with a company with your reputation and stuff, I think this is something you should look into to just improving that. But that's just a little thing, and I wanted to be honest about it because I think you guys prefer the honesty, and I think a lot of you think that. So I'm just saying what people think. Overall, guys, Fuji Xt3 is an amazing camera. Is it an upgrade from the Xt2? Absolutely. Looks the same on the outside. It's a beast on the inside. It's competing with all the best cameras out there. I think a direct competitor to the A9, believe it or not. I know people say, oh, it's APS-C. This APS-C is incredible. I don't think APS-C full frame should be your defining factor here. All my primes are 1.2s, 1.4s, f2s. I mean, from a depth of field perspective, really, like, you know, there is a difference. I understand that from a shallow depth of field perspective, but it's not as big as you think. So as a deciding factor to buy a camera, I don't think that should be on the highest on your priority. I think how compact is the camera? How far along in their history are they? How close are they to perfecting certain aspects of the camera? How have they addressed their clientele? How have they provided firmware updates as the camera ages with you? How have they improved the product? I think if you take all these factors in, and the lens lineup, and the quality of lenses, and the quality of glass, and the quality of image, the level of image quality they offer you, if you take the whole range into it, I think Fuji must still be, in my view, the leader in the mirrorless world. Sony is there. I don't know Sony well. They put out amazing cameras. But I don't know, they seem to know what they're doing, and they've put a lot of love, time, and effort into these cameras. So from me to you, if you're looking to get this at a $1,500 camera, gee, you can't go wrong. You're looking at the best value for money camera in the world right now. That's just my view. That can be used by an amateur, that can be used by someone getting in photography for the first time, that can be used by a professional. It covers the whole lot. It's just an incredible piece of engineering. And again, I'm so happy I'm with Fujifilm using the camera. And yeah, go out, check it out, guys. I'm going to be, by the way, I'm going to be at Photokina at the end of the month, which I'm really excited. I've been wanting to go to Photokina for like 15 years because it only happens every odd or every second year. But every time I have a job on, I can't go. So this is the first time I have set it aside. Mark, who's videoing with me, is going with me. We're going to go from stand to stand and look at all the products. I'm not just going to go to Fujifilm stand. I'm going to go to all the other manufacturers stand. I'm not going to necessarily get an opportunity to interview people because I'm sure the big YouTubers have already booked those people to interview. I'm just going to go to the products. If I see something cool, I'm going to do a bit of a video on it and we'll give a bit of feedback. And it won't just be cameras. I'm going to try to look at gadgets that make our lives easier, bags, things like this, which I think are super interesting and will be a benefit to you. So I'm going to have a good look. I'm there for 2 days. Each day, and I'm going to methodically go through every area there. I'm going to look at every range, and I'm going to find the things that I think are of interest to photographers, and I'm going to give you some information on it. So maybe you're in Photokina as well, and that'll be very cool. Enjoy it. And yeah, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Thanks so much for listening to me talk about the camera. It's a bit of a rush thing as usual. I have to give the camera back. I'm about to shoot into Cape Town now, city, to hand the camera back. And yeah, so a bit rushed. But I thoroughly enjoyed the camera, and I know you will as well. Thanks for your time. God bless. Cheers.